Sure is.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen and Budget Committee meeting tonight. Start off with the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic of which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Right. Anybody has a conflict of interest tonight, they could disclose it when that comes up. Believe we have any adjustments to the agenda. You don't have anything to go? Correspondence, there was a bunch of stuff in the packet and a couple of things left on the desk tonight as well. Those are all gonna be on the website for anybody to.
They will, yeah, we'll put those together, put them with the agenda.
Okay. All right, so we'll jump down to 5, public to speak. Looking for input from anybody that's here tonight, in favor or against or whatever, but we're talking about police and, budget that got voted down and looking as we move forward for input as much as we can get. We're meeting on Monday and that's why we're here again tonight for more input. So if anybody has anything they'd like to speak up, feel free. Jim?
Sure, I think one of the exhibits that was in the pack was something that I had worked on. I was thinking after our last meeting, there was a lot of engagement. There was some good information I thought that came out. So I wanted to document it, chew on it, and then I thought I'd share some of it with you if I could. So it looks like this. And this, it starts with our yearly year-round residents for about 1,200 we know about, right? Seasonally, the seasonal swell, 6,000 to 10,000. 4th of July weekend, this is all information we talked about last time, but 20,000 people are here. Then the chief gave us some pretty good information, and I sat with him because sometimes I don't hear everything well, to just verify the numbers. But these are mine. This isn't, I didn't ask it to be audited by anybody, so everything here is sort of information I pulled out. You can see from 1/1/24 to 5/31, when we were understaffed, the total calls we had 741 by the police department. A year later, fully staffed, it jumped up to 2,086. 425 of those were dispatched, and 1,600 plus were officer initiated. Likewise, year to date, nighttime, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., 225 dispatch calls, 1,065 officer initiated. And it was very interesting to hear him talk about that, and that's an officer going on his own and checking on a business in town to make sure the doors are locked. And they were telling me how they find sometimes businesses are open. Somebody forgets to lock the door. So they're preventing crime. The spring, and I don't have the months where it's just sort of seasonal, it was consistent. Spring 23, understaffed, 415 dispatch calls. Spring 24, 685. Fall of 23, understaffed, 231 calls. And it's almost four times larger. Fall of 24, 1,189. I know one of the things we'd asked about was what are the calls outside of our area? There was 42 year to date. Fortunately, one of them was just a couple of nights ago for that fatality up on South Shore Drive. And currently, the police department's averaging running about 400 calls. So they're filling it with the full-time 24/7. In my opinion, they're filling it for it. Crime deterrence, public safety, patrols around town. Then I was thinking, I think it was Lee Libby made this point that with the amount of new construction, we're going to see our tax revenue grow. So I went and met with the assessor. I didn't know him, real nice person, and I asked him for the 23, 24, the 23. You'll see that a year ago was $8.9 million at the same mill rate of 12.23. This year, 24, 25 net to be raised is 9.1, same mill rate. And we had organic growth of $166,000, and sort of, and that was what Lee was saying at the last meeting. As the new builds come on, our tax revenue will grow organically. I think the budget differential from last year's budget to this year is $260,000, at least portion. I know we've talked about we're at the unassigned fund balance has to come down in the next 3 years, right? And what about then? If this budget has to jump up. Well, if we're growing 160,000 a year, and we do that again next year or more following year. By the time we get to year 4, we're more than covered on a compounded basis. What's needed in the police budget. In fact, there's given a little more thought is, if the mill rate stays the same, I think you said that's the intent. A year from now, well, 3 years, the same mill rate. We should be able to look backwards. Say, okay, what are we seeing for a trend here? So 1.8 last year, if it jumps up to 2, you gotta think about taking some of that, spreading it towards the tax revenue. Maybe not all of it. Just to be safe, but we're in a really fortunate position. We're the state of Florida, the state of Texas, right, where people are moving to. We're not the state of New York where people are leaving. And that creates another whole host of problems, right? Because then your tax revenue is going down because people are leaving, you've got to raise your rates. So we're in very good shape, I think, financially. Then the second page, I was trying to get my head around what we translate out. I hear the concerns about fixed income, right? Being able to afford their taxes. What are we talking about for an average tax bill? I didn't know. So poor Marty, I probably drove her crazy with my questions. But I had 23 data, and then this morning she gave me an update of 25 data on the taxable properties in the range area. There's a couple assumptions here. Very first one is 30% of the tax bill is paid by residents, and 70% total taxes are paid by non-residents. You can see some of the numbers in here. So if we take our $9.1 million, multiplied by 30%, that's what we as residents are paying. How does it break down? Well, we've got 2,500 or so taxable properties in town. 713 don't have a house or a structure on it. Let's just take those out of the equation. They pay about $703,000 in taxes. So then we're left for roughly about $2 million, right? There's 662 E911 residents owned by Rangeley, full year round residents.
Jim, just a question. Where do the businesses go in those numbers?
That's a great question. It's in there. There's 46 commercial properties of the 662. I couldn't split it out. It's about 7%.
So it's in the residence?
It's in the residence tax.
Okay.
I love the,
No, that's
I'm
fine.
kind of a geek on this stuff. I can
Just want to make sure it was included.
So the 2 million divided by the 662 is roughly a little over $3,000, $1,000.67 actually, and that does include the commercial properties. I wouldn't know if commercial properties pay more, pay less. I just don't know.
They consider it.
Well, no, the rate is the same. Mill rate is the same.
Right, same.
Your value.
Value, yeah.
And so then
Sorry, Jim.
and then again, I just want to know what does this look like when you put real dollars on our mill rate? And the dollar values here, mentioned those are kind of low. Our valuations don't match market rates for houses are selling. So just this there. So this was just I thought there was some information that was at least helpful in my mind. Last week, about the number of police calls, how much it's grown, Lee's point about revenue growth, growing organically, and what talk about an average tax rate. That's my input. I hope it's helpful. This did some of the math on and want to share it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else have something?
I have a question.
Sure.
Your department, I thought they could only, stay in Rangeley and Wausau.
Yep.
I thought you were saying that they went on calls.
An emergency,
So, Chief, you want to answer that, Chief?
Oh, sorry.
Chief, can Rangeley PD respond outside of Rangeley
where can they go and why would they go?
So we would respond outside of range lead if we request shares. That's, could be down as far as Madrid, it depends on where the emergency is, how far.
So is that, are they billed?
That's through the
If they
mutual
went
aid
into
agreement that we have.
Yep, that is a mutual aid agreement, so it works itself out, they assist us, we assist them.
But we pay for
We pay.
sheriff also. So why shouldn't each, if you have to go to Sandy River should be paying them, because we have to pay them here.
That is a good point. Is that anything that we've, or you have ever looked at? Since,
Yeah, I don't have any information.
We should let them know that they will be getting a bill each time they call there.
Joe, did you have something?
No, there's not a billing arrangement, it is mutual aid, and as the chief said, probably wash. I mean, it's not, just to be clear, it's when requested. It's not, these are not areas that are patrolled by range PD. It's a request of dispatch for the sheriff's office, so, or other agencies.
The agreement specifically says if requested by SO, by the sheriff's office, they will go to the call. They have to be requested. They do not patrol or respond to calls without that request.
Right, and what is the schedule for sheriffs to be up here?
There is no schedule, just whenever they're coming through, or there's no set schedule that they come up and patrol.
But we do pay a certain amount of money for them.
Right. Just like the plantation, I don't know if they have a set schedule where they run through the plantations so many times a week or anything like that. It's when they're out patrolling. Shelley?
Do you actually have a copy of that mutual aid agreement that you have for each?
I have, yes.
What?
So Fernland's question about, how often the sheriffs come, the Ranger Police Department is a union department, so, even when Rangeley guys, officers have court dates, vacation time, this and that, we're not allowed to, the town of Rangeley isn't allowed to ask the sheriffs to spend more time here unless we offer the opportunity for those overtime shifts to the rest of the police department first.
For overtime shifts?
Well, they would most likely be in excess of their scheduled hours, which
Do
would,
we pay a lot of
which-
overtime?
there's a lot of overtime built into that.
There's 11 hours a week of overtime built in the current police schedule. 11 hours a week for one officer, it rotates. So it's built in.
Nancy?
Yeah, I wanted to raise a couple points. The first is to look at the police services that we've had in the past. And why you might not see so many calls, because I certainly didn't make it. We never really had a professional police department. We tended to, we were gifted with not necessarily needing one, and we would have retired people come up and they already retained their pensions, and it's like, would you be our sheriff? Would you do this? Yes. Then we had people that weren't necessarily trained the way this team is trained. This is a professional group. I know that many in town haven't had a chance to interact with them. But I want to make that point. There's a world of difference. These are people that I would call the drop of a hat. Now, for 15 years, we've been in business as the alley. We're what you call a soft target. You might have heard that term. A lot of what goes on in Rangeley is a lot of soft targets. We have tourists. We have hundreds of people we've never seen before. We have people coming up, hiding out here for weeks at a time. We don't know who they are. I would say prior to COVID, I had a pretty good idea who was in our place. On a given evening, if there's 200 people in there, I probably knew 30–40% of them. I also knew that probably 15 or 20 were concealed carries. I knew who those people were. So you kind of took care of your own security in your mind, because this is definitely a mental exercise. And I can't describe to you how stressful that exercise is on a given night, to your staff, to your team, and even more so now. I mean, a little over a year ago, someone strolled into Lewiston bowling alley and killed 13 people. The police responded in 2.5 minutes. And still there were 13 deaths. That entire place would have been killed here. Most probably, because I would have had to go through 911, explain the address, explain who I was, go through that whole exercise, and then it would just, you know, they wouldn't be mobilized. So many, many times when we would have strangers or people we were really not sure about, and I'm sure you could go to the hotel, you could go to the IGA, you could get example after example of this, but it's worse now. It's way worse now. Most of the people that come in, we've never seen them before. Nobody knows them. You're making visual assessments. Some of them don't make you very comfortable. And you're keeping an eye out on people all the time. You're watching in the parking lot. You know, there's more interest in theft. There's more strange substance that go on. There's all sorts of things that go on now. And in years past, we wouldn't even think about calling because it wouldn't really help. It would just be, you know what it would end up being? The incident would be over, we'd be cleaning up the blood or whatever, and what we'd be told, you know, make sure you write up your report and bring it to the police department tomorrow. So now it's 2 in the morning and we've got all right reports about what we saw. And that was the extent of what went on. I'm not pointing fingers at that situation. I'm just saying that we muddled through that. A lot of people muddled through that. Now we have a lot more outdoor activities. We have a lot more people here. We have people, I've got a house next to me every 2 days. There's brand new people with motorcycle gang 2 days ago, bachelor's party the day before that. Again, no complaints. This is great. We have all these people in town, but they are going to require services. Maybe they don't show up in this population situation. Maybe the person who owns that house is a family of 2, but you know, there's 70 or 80 people that occupy that house in the course of a couple months. And it's different now. We need 24/7 services. Most importantly, we need professional services, and we've got them. These aren't folks who are out to pull you over when you're driving silly on the road and give you a ticket. These aren't deputies who are stopping the young ladies in the middle of the night and pestering them. We've had so many situations, you guys all know it, that were unprofessional, and it's given this town a taste of, we don't want police. Police are just, you know, they're just pains in the butt. We don't need that. Well, we need it. We need it. And I'm not trying to fearmonger or say anything, because we'll get by with whatever situation you give us, but please protect the vulnerable. The people that you're hearing from here are not vulnerable. People on budget committee, they live with enforcement officers. I mean, even Ethna, she's got the animal, he's got weapons, I'm sure, animal control.
I'm Gary.
So I was saying, we have people that can take care of their pets. And I think that's a lot of the voters, they're people that they know how to take care of their mess. But there's plenty of vulnerable people in this town. There's plenty of domestic disputes that are hideous. There's plenty of things that go on here that you never would hear about on dispatch or anything else. So I just want to give my probably 25 cents worth of opinions on why we need this now. And please don't, I was so horrified when I saw the Highlander headline that said, you know, Rangeley votes down police department budget. That was the headline. When Moose Valley opened, we were on page 23 behind the B-1 bomber story again. It's like, that was the headline of the Rangeley Highlander. And what does that say to people? Was it the head of the Rangeley Highlander when you guys soared through our first financial audit in 20 years and were named to be one of the most financially capable municipalities in the state? I think you were top tier. I read that story. It's probably page 13 or 14. We never did well on an audit. You guys remember that too? Audits used to be a big deal. It was always like somebody messed up the audit. Well, now we're financially healthy. We really need to make some changes in the services, and I don't want to see us struggle over this one, because this is security. Because I'll tell you what's coming next. We need another ambulance. We need some full-time fire department people. We need a lot of services in this town. This is no time to look back and say, oh man, we raised this by this much. We're gonna need to spend some of this money on new services in town. We have to be here for the people who are here and for all the people that come to town. That,
Thank you, Nancy.
I just want to piggyback, as I have a question, but a kind of a piggyback off of Nancy's point. So as a single mom, a business owner, and an employee of the school, I'd like to ask the question, is there data, I'm sure there is, between response time of when we had the sheriff's department serving Franklin County up here, primarily in Rangeley, obviously, versus when we've had our full-time staff?
I don't have any of that. I don't really when the sheriff's department actually covers. I can try to pull some. Is there a time frame that you're looking at, or?
What, I mean, I think would be,
Like, is it faster to have our own police force?
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Filling the
As
same
a
need.
single mom, as an employee of the school, I would
We just-
believe that a full-time police department would show up around the corner to school if God forbid something happens.
Yeah.
Or to my home on Main Street or to my business. When I have 2 little kids at home by myself versus waiting 45 minutes for the sheriff's department, particularly if they're working in the south, to show up. Yes. To my point.
The town of Rangeley has never contracted with the sheriff's department for coverage. It's only been, Rangeley's always had a police force present, but not always fully staffed, and the sheriffs would treat us like they did the other plantations, but we've never the town of Rangeley has never contracted with the Franklin County Sheriffs for dedicated police coverage. So that data would
So
be.
it
But
would
that's
depend
still
on
not
where they
answering my
work.
question of what's the response time?
It would be
It does
different
answer your
in that
question because
contract.
it's not apples to apples, is what he's trying to indicate to you.
Okay.
The question isn't apples to apples. If we were contracted with county services, we would have dedicated service from county and the response time would be them right here in town, just like just like our local department. But we have never contracted with county services.
Thank God.
Yes, it would with contracted county services. That was the discussions we had, but it is not apples to apples to ask.
It's never
Correct,
happened.
correct.
So don't tell people what it would be when it's never happened. We've never contracted with them, we've never had them.
Correct. So my point to that, Nancy, is it's not apples to apples when you're asking that vague of a question. So I'm just trying to convey that answer.
Well, the answer
Respectfully.
is you only have them there if they, depending on where they were. If they were out in
Correct, because
Galloway.
we're not
when
contracted,
working on
they're
a
not
grant thing or
dedicated
something,
to us. Because we're not contracted and they're not dedicated to it.
Well, half this response isn't 100% true either, because the contract that we looked at 2 years ago wasn't for 24/7 coverage. So even if we had a sheriff that was stationed up here for 8 hours, 2 of those hours would be for travel time, but it's not 24/7
Thank you.
response time that you'd have for that. Keith?
I just, curiosity is kind of developing now. So, this is kind of new because I wasn't part of the conversation with contracts of county. If we went that route, or if that was if that was an option, or if it is an option. If those individuals are stationed here or are designated here, do they still have a reasoning or an ability to then respond to other calls if they're needed through Franklin County? So they could be called out of here? Or just,
Yeah.
just wonder. So then we would be same idea.
Just like your local department can.
Right, it can be
county
called,
council.
right.
It can be called out of here.
Yeah, it's just, again, just be a lapse in, we have a lapse in service now, but we can have a lapse in service there too.
Really?
Can't border patrol respond?
We had them here a couple of years ago, and they said basically, we shouldn't even see them besides them going to and from the station.
Yeah.
Oh, Colin, if you want to, Colin, yeah, Colin, get this one.
Yeah, I think,
I think, something we kind of started doing a few years ago is, trying to integrate ourselves more into the community. Like, over the past, I don't know how long the Rangeley's been in Rangeley, but, it's been sort of, like you're saying, Border Patrol kind of comes and goes, we kind of wait and off we go. But we've been more, community oriented the past couple of years. Now, as far as community policing, no, we can't do that. That is basically just unconstitutional. We're a federal law enforcement, we're not supposed to be doing municipal police. But in saying that, we will always show up if there's violence. We will stop violence. We will stop a medical need. We will stop anything happening to cause physical harm to someone. Will we run the case and we do all that? No, we'll sit on it until sheriff's department gets there and they'll take over the case from there. But there's one border patrol presence, but we're in a limited capacity what we can actually do as far as law enforcement in town.
A lot, I can sort of speak to that because I'm retired of Border Patrol, so I'm not talking authoritatively or speaking for the Border Patrol. But having spent 29 years with the Border Patrol and retiring here eventually, I can say that when we're available and when we're around, those are like only wins. If there's an officer that wants help because he's all by himself and he wants an extra set of hands, they can ask. And we've got the same training, very similar training and a lot of good experience, so we can always come help when we're asked. But we're backing up that officer, we're not forcing state local law. And like he said, we cannot enforce state law. I say we, that was me, it's not me. But they cannot enforce state local law on their own. They do not get dispatched by Franklin County. They have their own mission set, which is on the border. There's like 86 miles of boundary between Maine and Quebec, from New Hampshire to Jackman that they cover, and then all the way down to Augusta. And then they're frequently asked to help Calais Station, Holton Station, because they're also shorthanded and they need help in their remote areas that maybe we can get to faster. So those guys are spread super, super thin. They're super, super busy, especially this past year. They've taken on even extra duties now, driving all the way to Massachusetts, which is like an 18-hour day for them if you're lucky. So them being able to help, they're very willing, they're very happy, they're very capable to help when they're asked. They can't help unless they're asked, and they have to also be here and have time on their hands to help them when it does happen. So they can't be counted on, it's infrequent, but they are happy to do it when they're asked. So I don't know if that clarifies anything or causes more confusion. Say I'm retired, I'm not speaking for the Border Patrol right now, but that was my experience. There were issues in this area and the area that I was in before I came here where the local populace thought the Border Patrol could supplement the PD. They didn't have to pay for PD because the Border Patrol was always around. It got to the point where we basically had to say we are not responding to police calls. And you know, that kind of puts the town at risk, it puts the public at risk, and we're more than happy to help. Like officers doing things on their own when they want help. But at the same time, we can't be called to do the policing for the town. On that note, I can talk anecdotally. Limestone was going through similar things with their police department. So I was up in Worcester County before, and there was like 4 towns that had really robust police departments: Presque Isle, Caribou, Fort Fairfield, and Limestone. Limestone was going through some budgetary issues. They wanted to get rid of the police department, and they tried contracting with Worcester County. Worcester County gave them dedicated sheriffs to work in Limestone, but they were not nearly as effective as their own dedicated police department. They weren't as reliable. They weren't there as much as they needed to be. It didn't really work out that well, so they tried to get the police department back, and nobody wanted to pay for it. Now there's no police department in Limestone. So Limestone, in the span of about 2 years, going from a robust police department to contracting to no police department, went downhill. Crime skyrocketed. Property values went through the floor. Everybody who was like a responsible tax-paying, business-owning citizen, commuter to Caribou and Presque Isle, they left town. They went to Presque Isle, went to Caribou, or they left Maine altogether. They pulled their businesses and left town. Limestone got the 2 nicknames, Slimestone and Crimestone. And that was within 2 years of losing their police department. Rangeley is a beautiful town. It's a quiet town. It's almost Mayberry-like, but there is crime here, because I've seen it when I was working here. The calls in that paper have gone up significantly since we had a full-time robust police department here. So it shows that they're needed. And anecdotally, I can say that you don't wanna lose it. What else? I think that's it for now. I might pipe in again.
Thank you. You have a follow-up, Brendan, or?
No, I just have known of situations where there was 2 police on call and border patrol went with them. So it was overkill. But they can, obviously they can do it, you know, or they did it.
I'm gonna tell a very little story about a bunch of guys broke in, well, it was, we were places on at the time. They were having one of the bachelor parties, they're staying over at Joey's over at Town Lake, and, they went through our side window and took a couple of our custom made from Sally, like neon signs, their trophies, and then they disappeared, and I just happened to notice that sign was lit up, so I went crazy. I jumped in my car, told them to call, get the police there, and followed these guys. I kind of knew they were Town Lake, so I'm staying outside of Town Lake waiting. And I won't talk about the other officers on that, but he shows up and he says, well, I said, they're over there in that cabin, signs. He said, well, I'm not going in there. I called Border Patrol for backup. I go, Border Patrol for backup? It's a bunch of drunk guys down there and they have my sign. Hide it if they just got in the door. He said, well, I'm waiting for Border Patrol. I said, well, I'm not. And then so I walked down, so I knocked on the door. So I went down, and I said, I believe you accidentally left my sign. The one with the moose, big yellow thing says Moose House. He goes, oh, that was here in the room. I go, yeah, that was here in the room. So anyway, so I looked at, so he's now followed me down there. And it's like, and I looked at him like, that's my son. And he just looked at me and I went, grabbed it. He just marched off. So he wouldn't go, he'd call back up. And that was it. Nothing was gonna happen until Border Patrol backup showed up. Because it was and clearly it wasn't a hostile situation, and I'm sure it would have been handled much differently if I called today. And again, that's not anybody's life in danger. The other point I want to make is we keep talking about Rangeley as though it was the way it was. It's not the way it was. There's way more people here. There are way more people here that are complete transients that are here for a day and never coming back. We used to have people visit, they come time and time again. They just prayed for when they could retire and own a property here. And so you knew them, they were part of the culture. None of these people are part of our culture. They could care less about our culture or our Mayberry town. They're here to have a good time. They don't understand anything about the landscape or what's safe or what isn't. They get themselves in trouble all the time. I can't even tell you how many times they've made, they're in the wrong spot, they're down a logging trail, they're here, there, they shouldn't even be on an ATV. These people are not the same people we used to have. It's nothing but, it's a constant mess of dealing with this and dealing with the stress, especially if you're one of these soft target places. They come in and they're, you're just trying to size up. Is he gonna go crazy? Does he have a weapon? There's nothing you can do. You're just completely exposed. And as Kate says, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable in all these businesses. And you're not carrying weapons and you're constantly making deciding this. And in years past, you wouldn't even bother to call, but you'd have some game plan. I used to have a baseball bat around, but now I wouldn't even be so good about that. I mean, we need services here, and this should be kind of a 3-arm thing. It's not just the police, it's emergency because they're involved, it's fire because they're involved. All of these services need to be upgraded. They just started with the police because we had the opportunity. We managed to get one of the best chiefs in the state, and he managed to bring a lot of good guys with him. We had the best opportunity. The other towns wish they had that opportunity. And so that came first. I wish we almost would have done another one first because we have such bad feelings about the police in this town. But my God, this is just the beginning. And we need to upgrade our services in town in order to meet the needs of all of the new property owners and all of the new people in town. And there I said my piece.
Thank you, Nancy. Shelley?
So one of the things about coverage that we talked about, we've covered a couple times in regards to Franklin County. You have a deputy that lives in Dallas Plantation, and you have one that lives right in Rangeley who actually grew up in Rangeley. And at one point was the sergeant for Rangeley. So very familiar with how everything is transitioned. And we have had a really great couple of chiefs as well. Ernie Allen was great, Dwight Fuller. So what's
Based on
that?
what?
Based on what?
Based on
I
what?
worked with them. They actually were out there. They covered, they worked.
Point of order, Chairman. This shouldn't be a debate. She's trying to speak her piece. If you could ask Nancy to wait to be recognized before
Thank you.
she returns the.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Jill.
So I'm just saying is that there has been other chiefs as well that have been successful. And not to judge other people. I'm just saying, like, we're here to, it's about money. We're here to talk about Rangeley PD. It's not a matter of, to have them or not to have them. It's a matter of, looking at the schedule to see if something can change. And it's 24/7 availability, just like it is for the county, just like it is for the state of Maine. At one point, the county was 24/7 coverage. And because they did their, the calls that were happening through that period of time, there weren't enough to justify paying to have an officer cover those shifts. So we're looking at, it's not a matter of who's doing a great job, who's not, it's just a matter of why did it get voted down and what we can do to try to get it to go forward with the numbers that we can get.
Mark?
It's a Nancy's comment. It sounds like her anxieties caused by the increase in number of people coming here. If that's the case, maybe you should suggest to the Chamber of Commerce they quit inviting so many. Bigger isn't always better. And, to
It's
just,
not the amount, Mark, we still have the same capacities, we just have different people. Different visitors.
well,
I think other people would back me up on that. Over the last few years, it's been significantly different. Who comes to town, how long they stay, and what their intentions are. And it makes for just a completely different experience for those of us providing
a
service.
long time resident.
Joe?
Mr. Chair, Travis would like to speak.
Oh, hey, Travis.
Hi, everybody. I'm online, so a little bit awkward to speak to you all remotely, but I appreciate you giving me an opportunity. I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Nancy was saying because as a business on Main Street, we have dealt with some incidents over the years. And largely, I mean, we're not necessarily seeing a difference in the people, but some people seem to be willing to push the envelope a little bit more than they used to. That's really what we're witnessing. But beyond that, I just think that for us we need to have a police force in Rangeley, whatever shape it has and however you need to modify the schedule to make that work. We definitely need to have a police force. We need to have reliable response times. Some of the incidents that we dealt with, we had unacceptable response times. That was when our police force was understaffed or when we didn't have one. We haven't had to deal with any incidents since the police force has been fully staffed. Now, maybe that's because there's a deterrent in place. I don't know. There's no way to know that for certain. What I can say is with the amount of growth in town and that growth is not just tourism, it's also second homeowners. I don't think this is a conversation about the Chamber of Commerce or about businesses who are attracting tourism. There's going to be growth no matter what. And with that amount of growth, we need to have the adequate coverage. Voters did not vote down the police department. They voted against the budget for the police department. So the conversation should be about what we need to do to win those votes and to improve the budget. My only question is, if the voters do not approve an adequate amount to cover the expense, the conversation came up in the last meeting about the fund balance. what are the rules regarding using some of that fund balance to cover the shortfall? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, the access to unassigned fund balance comes only through town meetings. So town meeting could be asked a question to use it, and they can answer it yes or no. The board does not have access to that directly, nor do I. It only comes from permission of town meeting. Catch it, Travis?
So would voters be able to vote on, for example, a budget item that covers a portion of the police budget and then use of fund balance, perhaps unused funds from previous year's police budget to cover that difference for the current fiscal year?
The short answer is yes, Mr. Chair. Another short answer is that the town meeting already approved RV1, which has 1.3 million of unassigned funds in it. So the way to look at that is it kind of blankets all of the expenses equally. It offsets taxes. Again, back to the original question, that could be formulated, so there would be a portion of raise and appropriate and a portion of using more fund balance, if that were your pleasure. All set, Travis? Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but, I understand all the arguments. I believe that everyone, I personally support. I really think the police department is very important in this community. And I believe our community also supports the police department. Because just 2 months ago, you asked them to raise $100,000 and they voluntarily did. Based on the mistake that was made by our community. They stood right up like big boys and said, we're sorry. So I don't think our community is against the police department. One of the reasons that I'm here is education. Wondering when this day was going to come the last 10 years when we had the written town meeting versus the open forum. Back in the old days, we would have corrected this on the floor with 100 people. We would have amended it to some reasonable agreement that the police chief thought was going to work, and it would have worked. Here we have zero budget for the police department other than 3/12. It's not going to work with our current expenses. Again, I'm not against the police department, but when the people, not me, look at this budget and look at the 247, the 481 because of the 81 that was returned. It was 727 budget. Maybe I get the numbers off by 2,000. But we went from 240 to 481 to 729. A layman, when it looks at the $100,000 that we raised last month to support the police, is looking at that and saying, wow, that's a great number. They're not looking at their mill rate increase. They don't really know what that is. Hopefully you don't take their money out of capital reserve and pay this town and make it look like it's a facade. I think we need to be evaluated. We need to think about what we need for police, decide what this is, and hopefully go back to the voters and maybe. Whether we reduce it by 100,000, we add another 100,000 to it because we prove to them that we have the service they require. I guess that's what I'm thinking. We're going to sit here for the next several days in the next 3/12 and not just all this time. We got to make a decision. What are we going to throw back in the vote? Because they're the ones that are going to decide.
That's correct.
That's my guess.
Thank you, Larry.
Well,
I mean, you're clearly not gonna cover 24-hour coverage with the money, with a reduction of money. So therefore, you don't, majority obviously doesn't seem like you need that much of coverage. So amount of coverage, then realistically, you're gonna have to either shorten your shifts or get rid of an individual patrolling. And then that schedule becomes more palatable maybe to an individual. Maybe that budget at that point represented by those numbers.
If we do away with 24-hour coverage, then we decide we can't afford it. And I call the police at 2 in the morning. It's an issue in my home. Someone's still going to come
Eventually,
to my house.
Actually, someone will show up.
Sure. Eventually, someone will get
The ambulance,
Someone from.
fire department. There, yeah, and then sheriff,
Someone,
a sheriff.
hopefully it's
Yeah.
someone I,
Earl?
I'm not calling if I need help.
really different. I never really thought about the changes in the community.
I've been here about 38 years, and when I moved here, everybody stayed at the hotel, motel, or some cabins on the lake. Now today, we're a bed and breakfast community. There's a lot of parties. She's absolutely right in her assessment of what's going on at this. Anybody remember the drug house where we had the kills? Years ago. We call it murder, death, kill, and public safety. It's there. We had it.
We were locked out that day.
We were on lockdown in town. Things changed and crime is here.
Larry?
So how do we sell it? Taxpayers.
That is what we're gonna get to tonight. Cindy?
So bringing a point back to the undesignated fund balance that, this money just doesn't sit there. So as every year, a portion of the undesignated fund balance or surplus, or however you want to identify it, is brought forward in the RV1 article for voters to vote on. So there's no like special pot of money that can be tapped into just for, in this case, the police department. It helps to offset taxes in general. Just 2 years ago, we saw a county tax increase of just over $370,000 in 1 year because of our high valuation. And so if you think that taking 200,000 to set aside to help pay for the police department is going to make things better overall for taxpayers, it isn't, because all of the unassigned fund balance is used to offset taxes. So it's not just our budget, school, which can increase, anywhere from, 100 to 300,000 a year, or hopefully hold steady depending on student population. So it's what, it's an argument I don't support, because it's not, the unassigned fund balance offsets all costs. Maybe donations increase from 1 year to the next. It's things that aren't out of our control I don't, this unassigned fund balance isn't some special pot of gold that's gonna help offset this PD cost, because it helps offset all costs.
Yep.
So up until recently, going back several years, Rangeley had a very understaffed police department, but was budgeted for a fully staffed police department. So year to year to year, they weren't using all of their money because they didn't have people to use it. Where did that money go and can?
That went into the unassigned.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So we've never had the purpose we needed.
Joe?
Chair Travis had written in a question, but I lost it. Travis, can you hear me, and would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so just more on the topic of the fund balance. If we had those funds that were allocated to the police department in the past, and I understand that it's all in one big pot, that this isn't dedicated any longer just to the police department. I get that. But hypothetically speaking, if those funds were assigned to the police department budget in the past and they were not spent, why could we not propose to the voters an increase in that allocation from the fund balance for this coming fiscal year to cover that shortfall for the police department?
That shortfall's already covered in the amount that we're pulling out of the designated fund balance for this year anyhow, so it kind of answers your own question.
So it's already been done. That's already been approved.
Right, right. And nobody is saying anything about the other budgets that surplus is covering. They're just having an issue with the police.
So is it clear, maybe it's not clear to the voters that that is being covered from the fund balance? I mean, maybe this is an issue of PR and explaining it better.
And also, can we just get this on the record, that this measure went down by 10 votes. 10 votes. This wasn't an overwhelming majority of who voted. I mean, this is basically family members of some people here who didn't support it. I mean, this is a sliver, and I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about what this was about. People thought, oh, well, if we vote it down, we'll work on last year's budget. There was a lot of misunderstanding when people cast that ballot about what signal they were sending. And I don't know that we can necessarily go back and explain that to people, but I do believe that played a role. But this is not an overwhelming majority of people in the town.
Joe, did you have something else? All right, all set. Cindy?
So just to also counter Nancy's point that the special town meeting in April to approve the extra funds the police department asked for also only passed by a sliver. 12 votes.
17.
And there was a lot of confusion. People voted yes when they meant to vote no. There was no, they saw a figure in there. They have, it was a very open-ended.
I mean,
So I'm just saying, you've gotta, it goes both ways.
It does go both ways, but it's still a sliver. Doesn't it make the case that the board should be able, I mean, why not act on this, figure out how to do this for this year? If you decide next year you're in some terrible budget dilemma, then you can look at cutting back the police force hours, doing whatever you need to do. But I think what you're gonna find out going through this year is there's gonna be even more demand. There's gonna be even more things we need to add to this sort of service triumvirate in this town, because we haven't done it in years past. We haven't necessarily needed it. Now we desperately need to upgrade the services. And it can't be denied. And if we need to go through a whole education process with the town, we can do that. But really, that's why there's a select board here. This is a tough call, but I think you guys are voted in place to do it. And you guys are staffing them. You're the staff of the select board. So we ought to be able to figure out how to get over this hump.
Who's staff of select? No, budget committee is also elected or appointed when there's a vacancy, but it's an elected position as well.
But you're not the opposition. You're not the defund the police opposition. You're here to bring
We're here.
information.
We're here because there's a no vote, because we respect the registered voters of the municipality who voted no to the budget that was presented to them. That's what we're here for, Nancy.
I know.
So this back and forth and changing the narrative to make it look like an us against them is really just clouding the conversation and confusing
I'm
everyone.
not trying to cloud the conversation. I'm trying to
This
say.
is not a debate.
You're
I am
right.
speaking, you will speak when you're recognized by the chair of the board. Please stop doing that. This is not a debate.
Then direct your comments.
I am
to everyone
explaining,
else.
I am explaining the position.
Someone else. Don't engage me personally.
Point of order, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, guys.
Please.
Kitty?
Question. So originally, I've only been here for you, but originally the budget was for 200, it was for 3 sheriffs, 3 police officers, correct? For around 250, so that was always voted by the town year after year, but then you weren't able to attract anyone. And so when did it go from 3 people to 24/7? Was that put to the town to vote that, yes, that's what we were gonna look at?
2 years ago, we started looking at 24/7.
Okay, so was 24/7, did the town ever say, we want to get away from the 3-person rotating and we want 24/7? I'm just wondering how
No,
that.
back in the 2012 comprehensive plan, it was stated that we were looking at doing that
Okay,
moving
so-
forward. And even in this year's comprehensive plan that Cindy sits on, it says what the police department's made of, a chief, a sergeant, and 2 other officers. So that's the vision of the,
So that's been a big
you're
for a
right,
long time.
2012 was voted on by the voters.
Okay.
This one's under review. Move forward. Cindy?
The, actually, just a correction, Mr. Chairman, the current year's comprehensive plan reiterates what the current makeup of the police department is.
I believe that's what I said.
Yeah, no, it just reiterates how it exists right now. And, and there's a general statement that services, can be reevaluated or looked at for, for other, other measures or reasons within our public services.
Mark?
To Kitty's point, in yours, the comprehensive plan is a guiding document. The sections in it are intended to be discussed among the public and get enough public input that there's a type of consensus. I don't believe that ever happened with the police department. I don't think there was a public forum that discussed sheriff 24/7, a chief and 2 officers. So I don't think any consensus was really
So it can just be changed as people
developed. So
develop. Yeah,
I think,
okay.
and I think some people were in agreement with the way it is now, and some people weren't. I think that's what's playing out.
Larry?
Last year, we raised $555,000.
Joe?
473.
Only because of the 81,000. Earned $81,000 undesignated.
Budgeted amount for the year that we are in currently, 473.
Okay, so I'm looking at.
And that was for 3?
555 or 9120. On the version, it says $555 annual dollar.
Can you show that to him, Larry? You might be looking at something that, yeah. Errol, go ahead.
That's what's.
Nothing to do with what Larry has. You read the rule. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear. We just have to find it.
I'm off by 70,000, but.
That's just over there.
But if you took the 473 and you took the normal 3% increase of our annual budgets across the board, you took the $81,000 that you set back to designated funds a year ago, how close would you be to the department's budget?
I don't know.
200,000.
Okay, you took your 473 that you just gave me. Took your annual 3% increase. You took the $81,000 that you went to surplus last year, you are supposed to give it back. How close would we give you 724?
Yep.
You'd be the time frame between July 1 and October. So
This
this
is kind of about the solution you're back to voters for some reason.
So to explain Larry's number, he's got 555, which is 473 plus the amount that town meeting approved on April 9th to date. We estimated 95, it's gonna go a little over 95, which we've already disclosed. What's missing from that equation is a period of time from July 1 to October, some date in October when we're full staff and operating on 24 hours.
So the number went down, but if we went up.
The number, to answer your question,
So the voters were looking at a higher, lower number.
to answer that question, Mr. Chair, 705,000-ish is the answer to that question. That was the original number that came from the board,
I
but
to understand it.
And Joe, Larry, we're not ignoring you. We do have some stuff that was the chief and Joe put together that we're gonna be looking at later. So yeah.
I'm just throwing out.
No, and I appreciate that, but I don't want you to think we don't have something.
All I'm saying is, voters won't have to raise any fresh one. Sorry.
Jim?
I just want to set the table, the 473 number, of course, whatever it is, comes up, when we were working on that budget a year ago. I don't think you were in place yet. So we had nothing, we had no chief and no officers. Sergeant had just resigned and left to go to work for the sheriff's department. That 470 was created from pay scale that was in effect before they went into negotiations. We couldn't hire anybody because the pay scale was so damn low.
1975, I saw that. That one really attractive. Should have attracted it.
So we set the budget, then the union negotiations were finalized, and the hourly rates were increased substantially, and that's why year to date is something like $550,000. It was set off an old pay scale.
Joe?
Hey, thank you, Joe. That's an excellent explanation of it. As I recall, without having that sheet in front of me, when we did that budget process, I advocated for 3 officers and a chief, but those numbers were built on old numbers. So just to answer that question, I believe there were 3 officers and a chief, as I recall. But the hourly rates and salaries were out of date, because we hadn't completed negotiations yet. Typically with negotiations, just to clarify that, the boards will normally use what's called general reserve. So there's no problem with the contract. It went very well. It's a good contract for both people, both sides, both parties. Typically would be used general reserve, but because it's such a large amount and because we changed the schedule, the board, in my opinion, did the right thing and called that special meeting in April to ring the alarm on that, let you all know what was going on.
Cindy?
So just to piggyback on Jim's point and Joe's. We go through union negotiations every 3 years. There has never been a time when the collective bargaining agreement has been ready prior to budget. Never. I've been a part of 3 of them. And so the discussions are going on as the board, the discussions are going on during this negotiation process. You get a feel for how things are going because the union brings their negotiator to the table. They're advocating for their union workers. They've got whatever they're presenting to the town. We'd like this, we'd like that, et cetera. So you get a sense of where things are going during the budget process, and every 3 years, it is projected what we may need to take from general reserve once the union contract is approved. This is the only year it didn't work out.
Ryan?
I'd like to speak on the union stuff. As the guy who actually negotiates the contracts for the town on the union side, we did an actual wage study on 15 towns in the states where we pulled that were similar to ours. And we came up with a number which the police are getting now as a wage, and that is like the average wage. They're not above or below. And unfortunately, it happened to be several dollars higher than what they were being paid originally. So during that wage study, we came up with a number, and they're not even above where they should be. They're actually at average statewide for their price. So unfortunately, because we were so underpaid as far as the police department goes, for so many years, we were never able to fill those positions. When we finally brought the number to where it should be, we were able to fill the positions with good officers, and unfortunately, that was a very large increase in the budget that was unpredicted at the time of negotiations.
Roughly 55% of the 95,000.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Mark?
I think the town's acceptance of Maine PERS, the Maine Employees Retirement System thing, that allows state municipal employees from all over the state to move around and bring their benefits, their pensions with them and all that stuff. I think that's been a huge incentive in attracting employees for Rangeley as well.
As far as I see.
And I thank the selectmen for bringing that up and giving the town an opportunity to prove that.
I think Mark's absolutely right. I don't think we'd even be attracting any officers without Maine first. That was the first step.
Yeah.
And then everything else, like what Ryan just talked about, what we've done in the last several months is what allowed us to actually hire. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. Without that, none of it even gets started. We just did the rest.
Jelly?
And also, there's been a huge, speaking to that with the income and pay, there's been a huge, within the past year and a half, a huge increase for all of law enforcement throughout. So it's not just a matter of before and now, it's like a substantial amount of change
in their, what is it,
Across the state,
across the state.
and across all departments, so it's not just, yeah.
Bernard?
Around the community, people that I have talked with, it's left a bad taste in people's mouths about giving each police officer their own car and having them travel to J or wherever they're traveling back and forth. That's made a lot of people angry, including myself. I want the police department, but I don't think you don't hire a person and give them a car, especially if they're going out of town with it.
In a perfect world, we'd have all 4 officers here in town. And even if we went with county and we looked at their proposal, those cruisers would have been leaving the mountain every day as well. Because we needed to buy them new cruisers and they would have been taking them home to wherever they lived. So it's something that we would have dealt with either way.
And
Unfortunately,
also, if we have a regular town meeting, this would have been all discussed and taken care of. But when people are uninformed and going to vote, it's bad. And you keep saying it's on the ballot whether to have a town meeting or not, but you read it, you don't even know what you're voting for. So that's my input. There should be a regular town meeting and it would be discussed like this.
thank you. Cindy?
So just regarding the cruisers going home, you know, for any first responder, that typically happens when someone lives within the county or municipality or area they serve. Because from the time they leave their driveway, that is they're patrolling or they're out in their district or they're in their town or they're in their, you know, that's what our former officers used to do, but they lived in the area or the community. So I've heard the same thing, that this concern about the wear and tear on the vehicles. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, you know, we ended up in Rangeley is because as a game warden, you have to live in the district you serve. Because the vehicles go home and you're expected to, you know, respond immediately and have your vehicle there in the driveway. So that's been a bit of a contentious piece as well from people I've heard of, are the vehicles going up and down.
Well, like I said, the county vehicles would have been going anyhow. Chief?
So I will just reiterate that too as well. So it is very contentious for take-home cars. Municipalities generally in the years past have not had take-home cars. It is becoming more and more. I know Farmington PD is doing it. Wilton PD is looking at doing it. JPD is doing it. Mexico PD is shut down, but they were doing it. And people are responding all over, from 40 miles, 50 miles, wherever. I mean, even the counties, I know several counties that have deputies that do not live in the counties that they work. So, it's happening around the state. And that's something new that's coming up, for an incentive to hire.
Thank you, Chief.
I mean, with this conversation now, so is there, up top of your head, what would be a cost savings if those cars stayed put? If those officers had to go home every night in their personal vehicle, what is your best guess on cost savings between, I'm just gonna say gas at this point, because wear and tear is unpredictable. You can say traveling is gonna irritate some things, ball joints, tires, brakes, et cetera, but that could happen sitting in the driveway, that brake could lock up, whatever else. We've seen it time and time again with cars that sat in the parking lot. But in your best guess, what's the cost savings?
So I increased the gas budget by 4,000. That is the only thing that I see. Maintenance, yes, I increased that because we have 4 cruisers, not 3. We do have an old one that has sat for 3 years. Generally, that's gonna use more maintenance. But the only thing that I increased in the budget for the take-home cruise is the $4,000.
Cindy?
Then in the capital expenses, you know, it cuts the life of the vehicle in half, as I know, being part of the budget process in years prior, it seems that the vehicle replacement seems to be really focused on the mileage. And I've had a number of people cruising through my office this week, and someone with mechanic experience I mean, they brought up the cruiser piece. It's just not settling well with folks for some reason. You know, he ballparked 12,000 a year per vehicle as far as wear and tear. I didn't ask for it. That's what his projection was as having repair experience.
I will reiterate that that's one of the bones of contention I'm hearing, but I feel like the chief answered my question relatively well at the last meeting when I asked what impact that was gonna have on the cycling out of the vehicles and when we were going to put them in the capital improvement plan. And you said, instead of, I think past practice has been at $40,000 to $60,000, we were ditching cruisers.
Miles.
And
Miles, not dollars.
sorry. I meant mileage. At 40 to 60,000 miles, we were ditching cruisers and I would hate to see us use the mileage as the caveat for why we swapped them out. And you answered my question really well at the last one, letting folks know that that is not the plan for these future ones. That there'll be several key factors that you look into, and you were looking at pushing them out to hundreds of thousands.
Joe, did you
I
have
just
something?
wanted to reiterate that, because I did feel that was a huge point for me, that folks were coming to me and asking, so that's why I asked the question at the last.
Mr. Chair, I think that covered the point I was gonna make. I was just gonna elaborate a little bit that as long as I've been doing capital plans, I included years as an important factor too. And when I met with budget committee either the last time or the time before, they convinced me to change my thinking on that and use mileage as opposed to you.
Ethan?
One of the things we thought about when we used, take-home cruisers as a recruiting tool was the fact that it was going to be very difficult to attract an officer, even if he or she wanted to work here, in order for them to find a rent or find a house. Now, many of the people in this room have owned their houses since the 80s, because I know you all. And it wasn't that difficult to do that before. If I didn't have the house I lived in right now, I wouldn't be able to buy another one on the salary that I have. So interestingly enough, our comprehensive plan, I can't remember her name, the lady that's helping us.
Donna.
Well, Donna keeps reiterating it, and in the last meeting she did as well, last time I spoke to her, that housing is still the number one concern of the townspeople, according to straw polls or whatever we did with that. So that's a big part of the comprehensive plan. So we knew that if we were going to attract trained officers, quality officers, or maybe any officers at all, that we were going to have to figure something out, because $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 houses, it's tough to get families to uproot, and it's tough enough for a seasonal worker to come up here and find a rent. Like every summer, Brian Wilbur and I would come home from college, and he'd rent an apartment. There wasn't a question whether we'd get one. He just called Steve Philbrick up. He's like, "Yeah, I got one for you," and we'd rent an apartment, and then we'd go back to college, and then we'd come back and rent another apartment. You could never get, it was fine, but it's not like that anymore. And there's a lot of people that can't rent, and that's why that housing development's going in. That's why people are. I'm finally starting to see people open their houses up, or second buildings to rent. Ideally, yeah, we'd love to have all these guys living here, but not a lot of people can. The houses that are being bought and being built are by the second and third homeowners, who Airbnb them out sometimes, or a lot of the time, or come up and use them because they can afford to. And we love those people. A lot of those people are some of my best friends. But that was one of the big reasons. It's not ideal. I understand that. And I knew eventually or right away, people were going to have a problem with this. But we felt something needed to be done to have a police department, and the speed at which we rebuilt this department, I was, every time I'd get a phone call from Jim or Joe, I'm like, holy mackerel, really? And so anyhow, I just wanted to make that point so that everybody knew that was part of the thought process. It wasn't just, let's offer them cruisers so we can get a department. Anyways.
It's a little off topic, but if you ever want to like set up a committee or some group to look at some business development venture ideas, a lot of towns are investing in real estate right now for just this reason. And I think that there's certain service positions and certain needs of the community. I know that the comprehensive plan doesn't go down into that depth, but say if you're gonna look at things like long-term care or pharmacists or whatever, police officers, people that you need, want to have in the community. It could fall on the town to create those incentives and that ability to bring those people to town. It may be a down payment thing, it may be whatever, but I think trying to get some forward-looking thinking, especially in a community like this, as real estate is valuable and becoming more valuable. It makes sense to look at this and look at maybe some key positions and what the town, via taxpayer, via grants or federal monies or whatever, could set up so that we could provide either down payment assistance or housing or whatever for certain key positions that we really need to bring to the town and won't be able to come without help like that. So I don't know if that's a committee or if that's a group that could come up with suggestions. But I think it could be useful at this point. I know that's off topic, but.
Yep, no, thank you for your input. Anybody else have anything else? All right, gonna come down.
I just, Nancy, were you thinking the plantations would be involved with this process as well?
Yeah, anybody, yeah, I mean, I think anybody, just looking at some regional, something that we could do to make investments or.
You can bring it up at a quarterly meeting, the next quarterly meeting that they.
With Kingfield has something.
Yeah, I know your best.
It's a nonprofit, they got
do
grant
stuff.
money and stuff like
Yeah.
that, they're gonna be building.
Sorry.
Larry?
Services, so as you grow, you grow.
Could be something to look at.
As it grows, for services grow. We implemented a 0.5% sales tax for services.
Oh, for services, oh.
I don't know, legality get back, but part of us all the time.
Yeah, it was also. Yeah, that should be considered, like, a lot of ways.
For services, not for me, services.
Right.
You came over. You don't have it.
Yeah, as long as it's,
Exactly.
yeah, maybe for public safety or
Right.
something like that.
All right,
Characterize.
no, that's a good.
Police budget, police
Keep
budget,
that.
police budget.
You just want to say everything.
Okay, thank you. Trying to. I'm trying. All right, guys, we're gonna jump down to number 6 here. Joe presented us with some different scenarios here, and I'm gonna throw it to the budget committee for you guys to talk amongst yourselves and come up with a recommendation you're gonna throw to us, and then we're gonna recommend something, set a town meeting date, and move forward.
Do you have an explanation?
You certainly missed me.
Yeah, no, I figured you were gonna get it.
Tight turnaround there in producing these, so apologize for seeing them right now. You may not have them. So there are 3 custom budget reports that we've prepared. First one is got my handwriting at the top, says town manager proposal. This is the one that I am recommending this evening. It is based upon the second one in your group that was prepared. So what Chief did was he went through after hearing the conversation the other night and scrubbed out about 14 from the budget committee's recommendation 7. Most of that is in, a large portion of that is in overtime. That's the primary avenue that he used to come up with that. That's different than the proposal I'm making, which is $3,500 higher than what we came up with. I think it's important that the chief's COLA increase is included in this budget. I know that it was taken out of the budget committee's recommendation, but I'm proposing that with the chief's edits, that we reintroduce that out of 24 full-time employees, all of us are getting an increase this year, some of them significant. Even though he's been quiet about it, I don't, we need to make sure that that's in there. The third item that you have, I am not recommending, however, I think it's important that you have this arrow in your quiver when you get to town meeting. There's a reduction in force. Cuts out 1 officer. The total of that is 570. Again, it's not my recommendation, but that's for your information, for public's information on what that would cost. And we can talk more about the implications of that if we need to. But my proposal is the first one on the list, which is a total of 691,877.
Larry?
Supposed to go, what is it, the one? Or 2 or 3, or we propose to be back tonight, which one of those 3 you might want to go?
We're gonna go with the budget committee recommendation, we're gonna go with the select board recommendation. Joe?
Mr. Chair, and so everybody knows, that will happen. And then under the next agenda item, the board will talk about the format of the town meeting warrant first phase. When we get to that, the board will talk about that.
Great.
So the only change, Joe, was the 3%, the COLA between your two budgets.
Correct, between the
Okay.
chief's recommendation and mine. Yeah.
Smart.
I was wondering if the budget committee could call a meeting on Monday or something, Monday or Tuesday of next week, so that we could get together and discuss things and make a recommendation.
I'm trying to wrap things up tonight, I think. Yep. Oh, sorry, Shelley.
So, when we talked on Monday, I was under the impression that we were gonna be presented something so we could see something and then make recommendations, not actually have something recommended. Cause I would like to honestly see, numbers where, cause right now it's 36 hours, one shift already a week, and then it's 48 the next. And so what it is it's 24/7 availability. Because they 6 hours of every shift, they are in the Aquatic Fire Station and they are staying there. And I guess one of the other things that came up as well is that we'd have a non-working patrol chief. And except he covers, when he needs to for, vacations and stuff like that to assist. One of the things that I was hoping to see is that if you did the, 3, because you have 3 patrol. If it's 2, 2, and 2, and then the chief were to cover 1 shift, what those numbers would look. So there's not that added in overtime. That we've been.
On that reduced budget that you gave, is there some sort of a proposed schedule that went along with that, or how it would play out?
Yeah,
Explain that.
but you probably have to change some, which there was a reduced force, right? We still could.
Correct, yeah, if it's down to 3, yes, it would be.
The reduced force, and there would be the possibility for reduced coverage. I just, Mr. Chair, if I could just.
Go right ahead, Joe.
Remind the board and budget committee and others that, one of my main concerns in this, I understand you gotta talk this through and have some time to do that, but typically in July, we do tax commitment, which causes the tax bills to be printed and sent out by the due date in September, which town meeting is set. So there is kind of some timeliness in there.
Kitty?
So on the appendix A, with the salary and wages, does that not have the COLA in that? So when I look at your appendix A, if it says with a patrolman, not academy, then it goes up.
So, Mr. Chair, appendix A covers union employees, and that sheet is for the year that begins July 1. Those are set there. So the increases that they negotiated, we negotiated, are included in that. I wouldn't assume that they're exactly 3.5%. They were probably, the 3.5% I'm talking about is for the chief.
Okay.
Which was removed in the original budget committee recommendation.
I just wanted to, for the record, just make sure that folks are aware that what was presented originally was for 4 officers and the chief, correct?
No, Mr. Chair, it's
Okay,
3
so that 705 is 3 officers.
plus the chief.
I just, maybe because Ryan's here and then you have union and Joe's gonna know this and the chief's gonna know this, but part of the conversation we're having, whether it's reduction of the force, schedule changing, whatever, you have a unique concept of this now that isn't gonna be a quick process to renegotiate or look at a schedule change. So what does that do to this whole process? Like if we all of a sudden decide that we're gonna drop down to whatever whether it's 570, chief and 2 officers, whatever it is, there's obviously implications to the union here that we have to timeliness they look at in this whole negotiation, or not negotiation, but budgeting process.
Yes, it would involve a change to the schedule. The contract calls for notification period. It's either 2 weeks or 30 days. I'd have to look it up. But there would be, if you were to use that reduction of force or other liabilities that are not written on the sheet there, like payouts of vacation or other personal time, and the liability to the town for unemployment, not come completely from elsewhere, but expenses there.
So I mean, those are real numbers that we have to consider through this budget process, obviously. This isn't gonna be just a, we meet, you meet, here's recommendation, because it has to be coming through that other third avenue now of whether these guys decide to stay or not, or the union box up a little bit and they fight for something else. So this isn't gonna be a quick process no matter what we do.
I would assess that that's correct. Cindy?
I would have loved to have seen a proposal. I'm not in favor of reducing an officer. I would have loved to have seen a shift in the schedule. The original union contract that the board approved last July was 12-hour shifts. And you changed that last year, so Keith, in following your point, there were a number of changes made during the course of the year that, maybe if we had just stuck with the original union agreement, we wouldn't be here, because a lot of what we're dealing with, no one's arguing about the pay. We respect salary surveys, we respect the results of reality. But when you've got 11 hours a week of overtime built into the schedule, that's where the increase is coming from. And so if you had, and plus the schedule is we're being promised this great coverage, but it's a fragile schedule. When you're working 18 hours a day, sleeping or resting for 6, you can't do back-to-back days. If someone calls in sick, if someone's out on, they get their appendix out, they've got a family event, or they're taking vacation time, that's jeopardizing the safety of the officer and the integrity of their work. I've experienced it with my husband out on search and rescues for days in a row. So I would have loved to have seen 12-hour, same amount of officers, 12-hour shifts.
Nick?
I just have one question. First of all, are the officers working consecutive 18-hour shifts? 2, what is the rationale of an 18-hour shift versus the 12-hour shift?
Rich, could you speak to that?
So no, they're working one 18-hour shift and then they're off for 2 days. Then they're coming out working 18-hour shifts. The rationale between the 12-hour shifts is 12-hour shift, you have an officer that's going to travel up here anywhere from 3 days a week to 4 days. 2 days in a row, they're traveling back and forth. This schedule that we propose with the 18-hour, 24-hour coverage, 18-hour shift is the officers traveling up here anywhere from 2 days a week. On their long week is 3 days. So and that was the, point of recruitment, to be able to entice people. I don't have to drive to Rangeley an hour, 5 days a week. It's from when I had it was probably out for 30 days. I had 3 qualified candidates. I had 4 other applicants that had 0 law enforcement experience. So they would have to go to the academy, 100-hour course, so on and so forth. So looking at bringing qualified people up here and not traveling 5 days a week was a recruitment tool and enticement to bring people qualified.
So the 24-hour schedule is also less wear and tear on the vehicles too.
Correct.
Thank you. Joe?
Chris, can we talk about what happens if we're on a 12-hour shift? What happens when those folks punch out at the end of their shift? They go home. Who's covering town?
So on a normal 12-hour shift, it takes 4 people. We ran it in J for many years. You have your day shift works anywhere from 6A, 5A to 5B. And then someone comes in at 5 PM and works overnight till 5 AM. But it takes 4 people to run that shift, and they're, once they clock out, they're headed home and, they're off the clock. So,
All right. I'm gonna advocate for this 12-hour shift just because it's what you signed on for, Chief Payton, when you were hired. The union contract was signed after you were hired. And so the 12-hour shifts, I'm not saying that it needs to look like Jack. You could have, people want this weekend coverage. So for Fridays when you're off, you've got 2 12-hour shifts. Saturday, 2 12-hour shifts. You've got the 24-hour coverage from 8 AM to 8 PM, 8 PM to 8 AM, or whatever. They're 12-hour shifts, however you wish to schedule them. So you've got the 24-hour coverage on Friday and Saturday. Sunday through Thursday, a 12-hour shift from noon to midnight. You get you need to do a little patrolling from 7 AM to noon. And then when your officer comes in at noon, there's your admin time until, noon till whatever. You're a salary, so you clock out when you can. So, it's it's a different thought, and it's 36 hours a week per officer, plus whatever overtime there is, because you've got 594 hours to cover in sick and vacation time, which comes out close to an extra shift a week for an officer to earn overtime. So anyway.
If only we knew when all the crime was gonna happen, it would make it easier.
Well,
Ryan?
I just wanna clear one misconception,
I think we spoke about. The union has never negotiated the hours of work for the police department. It says in the contract that the police chief and the town's needs are set through the police chief. With 2 weeks' notice, he can change the schedule for the police department. We never negotiated a 12-hour shift schedule. That's never been on the negotiation table as far as the schedule of the police. It doesn't even say that in our contract. It says in our contract, it's up to the police chief, and then it said that the needs of the town determines what the police schedule is. I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you, Ryan. Joe?
There is an MOU relating to schedule that talks about the 7K work percentage. We talked about that in last meeting. But I wanted to follow up, Chief, on the scenario where an officer punches out after a 12-hour shift. This redirect is who's on call? And if somebody's an hour away, who's gonna respond? How does that work? Was there some thought put into the 24-hour schedule with folks who are on call who live an hour away?
Yeah, so it basically would be, obviously I'm on call all the time. So yes, I could be a responding officer after midnight if that's the case. But it also could be the next oncoming officer that's coming in at 8 AM could be, if there's a call that comes in at 3 AM, they could be responding in. So now if they're working a 12-hour shift, they're gonna be out here. So I think going to a 12-hour schedule, kind of what Cindy is, I hear that there's gonna be a lot of on-call at home service. And I think at that point, it's gonna look like what you're seeing with the sheriff's department service.
And I envision, just to follow up on that, I thought about this some, talked about it. I envision cost with that, right? So if it's a call in you get paid. You're gonna be paid to be on call, but you also, the officer will be paid, to get here, and if it exceeds 2 hours, then it's only. So there are those costs that would have to be tabulated, so it's not just an automatic savings, there are costs built into that, and then I think that the human resources come from somebody that's gotta respond. I mean, I travel, and I can't imagine doing it under duress or an emergency, in January, that I would not favor that. Number one, for officer safety, number two, for the citizen safety, number three, that's gonna burn people out, right? It's not a good model in my mind. Jim, sorry, Jim had his hand
Yeah,
up.
no, absolutely. I just have.
Yeah, so I got an opinion that, I think we have, echoed Nancy's comments earlier. An incredibly professional police department. And we hired a great chief. And I just, I get concerned. I put my faith and confidence in chief for the management of his staff, what's best for this town. And I don't think we in the budget committee should be directing how he manages the shifts for these people. And, quite honestly, from what I heard, one of the attractions was that they weren't coming up here 4 or 5 times a week. This allows the chief to get the high caliber people, the system that he has in place, get the high caliber people that he has. So I fully support it. And I'd also think that I'd like to make a motion that we as the budget committee move to accept one of these budgets tonight, because we are under the gun to get this done, to get it out to the town. Thank you.
Cindy?
So just to follow up on Ryan, yeah, I had, so what it says for the police department schedule is it shall be 36 hours a week, 1 week. 48 hours the alternate week. So historically, historically that has meant 3 12-hour shifts 1 week with 4 12-hour shifts the next, but you're right, Ryan, it doesn't specifically state 12-hour shifts. That's just how the schedule has always gone, with this 36-hour 1 week, 48 the next. So I did read into that. And my point was, and it's to pull up on what someone said earlier, I can't remember, maybe it was Fern Lynn, is that we already pay for county SO coverage in our county taxes. We're the second highest taxed town in Franklin County. We pay heavily to support the SO, and the current budget doesn't, the current schedule doesn't allow us to make use of that money that we're already paying into the SO. The SO's they've got to patrol all around us. Lang Township, Dallas Plantation, Rangeley Plantation, but they will not patrol through us when we've got, unless they're notified. In the past, the prior chiefs would give, would give the SO a call, be like, okay, no one's on. Just so you know, to work us into your rounds, into your drivability. That was my point. And it's like, we're already paying. And, I would love to see a year's history of dispatch calls. Let's see when Rangeley PD is needed the most.
Until the one time they're not here and we need them. You can go off the phone, you can play both sides of that thing, but you know as well as I do, if it's my family, your family, granted, I have my own protection, you have your own protection at home, I guarantee it. But you're gonna sit here and try to schedule something on historical data, which I know is super valuable, but that one time when something happens, and it has happened, and I'm gonna go back a little bit further because I'm not trying to get irritated, but like, we're paying for county sheriffs, absolutely. It should be utilized. We're fortunate that we have 2 that live in close proximity, because I guarantee you if they weren't here, coverage would have been a lot different in that patrol route. So there's value there, but we're never going to see it. We wouldn't see it the same as we do right now. I can guarantee it.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like the budget committee is going to have an opportunity.
Definitely not.
Meet on an alternative date. And so to follow Jim's advice that we're under the gun, I'd like to make a recommendation that the budget committee vote to support the reduction in force proposal at $570,157.
Can you just, can somebody, I didn't get all there, but can you just explain what that reduction in force looks like?
So yeah, it's gonna.
Can you wait for a second?
We can, I mean, I don't, sorry, I mean, everybody, I'm just asking what it looks like, so if you're gonna. I can stop talking.
No, it's your meeting.
You can finish the discussion. I retract my.
Well, I made there was a motion.
All right, so finish the motion, and I'll retract my statement. I'll retract the question. Try to be.
So where are we? Mark's making a motion.
For this one, for the reduction.
All right, so Mark has made a motion. Jim, I'll just step in as the budget
Oh, yes.
committee chair.
Go ahead.
So Mark has made a motion for the, proposed police department budget of $570,157. Is there a second? Going once. Going twice. Motion fails due to the lack of a second.
Can I ask a question? So if this goes forward and it goes to everybody in the town and they deny it again, then we're still going to move the money that was appropriated to cover them until October?
Mr. Chair, we have 118,000, which will go to probably late August. If it, to answer your other question about if it fails, the format at town meeting, they'll have the ability to either have a capped article or an open-ended article, which we're gonna talk about. Next question, but town meeting will have the binding authority to decide what the final amount.
Jim, did you have your hand up, Jim?
I want to make a motion.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion that we, forward and approve the town managers, for both. Of $691,077 and say, actually about $12,000. Original budget.
So it's Jim's motion to move the police department budget at $691,877.
I'll second that.
And that is seconded by Kitty. All right, so discussion. So just to clarify how this looks moving forward and why we're doing what we're doing. So so is this going to open town meeting?
Yes, that's the plan. We're gonna set a date later in the agenda.
All right. So at open town meeting, they'll have a recommendation from the budget committee, and they'll have a recommendation from the board of selectmen, and ultimately, you know, it is those that are attending that decide, you know, someone will make a motion, a second, and so we're just providing a guideline. I would love to be able to have a budget committee meeting. I just don't.
So because there's no other proposal on the table. You know, there's no 12-hour shift proposal, there's no other, you know, there's not enough details. But we really don't have a choice.
Why don't we? Why don't we have a choice? Why are we looking at this now and making a decision in a half hour?
This was one recommendation that you guys asked for at the end of the last meeting, putting it down to the chief and two officers.
Which we were made
Those
notice.
reductions, that his budget that he presented, he and the chief worked on, it's basically the barest of bones to keep the 24/7 coverage. I don't know what other proposal you'd like to see on the table.
Well, I think the budget committee can propose whatever the heck we want.
Well, now you can. When I asked you, why didn't you do it back 3 months ago, you said you couldn't do that.
We're talking.
So make up your mind.
We're talking now.
No, it's now or then, okay?
That's not.
So I had second that, but the actual reality is, you can say we're gonna say 600,000 and you need to figure it out.
That's we can say that's what we recommend, yes. and then it's brought for discussion at town meeting. I mean, we can recommend anything. We can, you know,
You can, which is why I asked you to do it back in budget season. You said you weren't allowed to. You couldn't do that back
the
then.
voters have
So make up your mind. Which way
Voters
it
have
is.
spoken.
Oh, it's, don't go there,
Don't-
Cindy.
Jim, please.
Cindy, please, and right, exactly. Mark?
Yeah, to clarify why I made that motion to go with low one, I don't believe that, it got rejected at the town meeting for $11,000. So I was looking to give the voters an alternative. That's why I went with, suggested the 570,000, thinking that there could be discussion
yeah.
with a larger group at an open town meeting, you know, and
Next.
now there's only gonna be, if you approve this one now, this, you know, the selectmen gonna pick one of those. So,
You do?
like.
You know what I'm gonna do?
Well,
You seem to know a lot the last few meetings. You got a crystal ball?
I think it's likely the selectmen are gonna, based on the conversation, approve either the town manager or the police chief, so.
Okay.
I was just gonna try to give the voters an alternative.
Carol, you had something?
I just don't think the budget committee's been listening to the townspeople that are here. You guys, we have a seasoned police department that is fully staffed, functioning and operating. There's no complaint. I've been in this building since 1988. I have never seen a police department function as well as this one does. Let's support them and move forward.
Thank you. Tony?
I just have a quick question, to plead ignorance, I don't have a budget in front of me and I haven't been, meetings for you talking about this. Everything tonight has been in terms of their salary. What is the chief's budget to operate the department separate from salaries? I mean, does he find it adequate?
Go with the chief. You got
No,
that?
for instance, you have to buy vests, you have to buy ammunition, you have to do, this, that, and the other, grading. Equipment repair. You have that all itemized, there's the police budget.
About 60,000.
60,000 per hour.
Just doing it in my head.
Yeah.
You got 434 for compensation, 204 for benefits, 694, about 60,000.
I'm just curious.
Cindy?
It's about 160,000.
So I just, so Harold, our Mr. Chairman, the budget committee's role isn't to speak to whoever is fortunate enough to be here, ask questions and we're responding to the message from town meeting, Harold, that it was rejected. So let's have a discussion. This isn't open town meeting. This is a failed vote. That's all we're operating.
No, Madam Chair, I'm not disputing that, but it's not your job to set policy or hours. That's the town manager's job. Your job is to give them the money and the tools to do their job. You sitting here and saying you're gonna have 12-hour shifts doing that, you are not, that is not your job. I've sat on this committee for multiple years and I know what the job is, budget committee.
The job of the budget committee is to thoroughly review the numbers that are given to us and make the most fiscally responsible suggestion to the taxpayers.
I don't disagree
So
with that.
that is what we are trying to do. While because the topic is so contentious, we keep getting mired in this back and forth. I dislike you conversation that keeps happening. And it's exhausting. I will be honest. Thank you, Chief, for doing what you did to get the numbers to us as quickly as you did. I really appreciate it. I should have been a little more honest with what my expectation was from maybe management and however that played out when I asked for different numbers. I was thinking somebody would honestly go look at it and give us some cost saving alternative options like using part-time reserve officers, scale back some overnight coverage, maybe rotate a fourth officer shift for shift relief. I mean, I was looking for, give me some real, you really looked at and listened to the people that said no. While I do not support this, reduction in force, that's not what I've ever been after. I've said it, I've been honest and open about it the whole time. Rangeley needs police coverage. Whatever that looks like is our responsibility to come up with the best fiscally sound option for this community. And I do not believe, from what I've heard for feedback, that $700,000 is a fiscally sound police department for Rangeley proper. That is the feedback I have received.
Cindy?
And just to respond, my comments were based on the collective bargaining agreement that was signed a year ago, nothing I created. I wouldn't dare, this is, my comments were like, all right, this is what was signed last July. And it's the schedule that has driven the budget up, that's all.
I'd just like to get back to the motion that's on the table. Thank you very much for what you just said. But guys, we're going way outside the guardrails, so is there any more discussion on the motion that's on the table?
Is there any more discussion? All right, so so the motion that Jim made and Kitty seconded was to propose a $691,877 budget, police budget for fiscal year 25-26. All those in favor? It's 2 in favor. All those opposed? That's 3. Are you opposed?
Well, I have more information now. So can I abstain?
I don't think you'll oppose, okay, yeah, so that's, so the motion fails due to a lack of a majority. So, so I think now that it's been confirmed, that this is, because we currently have a secret ballot town meeting scheduled for August, but looking at this agenda, the Board of Selectmen are gonna make a call for an open town meeting. And so, what the selectmen are going to propose and what the budget committee are going to propose is just a springboard for discussion. Is that correct?
Joe, you wanna?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. State statute says if there is a budget committee and they make a recommendation, that recommendation must be put on the ballot. It doesn't say if there's no recommendation, it's not gonna be printed on the ballot. But it would say budget committee, no recommendation. If there's not a recommendation made prior to the Board of Selectmen calling a meeting. Budget committee cannot stall the Board of Selectmen from calling a meeting.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be our intent ever.
Mark, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion that, the budget committee recommend a police budget of $575,000, not based on anything put behind it, just as a total to let them figure out the best way to implement.
So Mark's motion is to put forth a budget committee recommendation of $575,000. Do I have a second? Second going, all right, I'll second it just for the sake of discussion. Because this is actually what a constituent had recommended that we do. Is they said, just propose a flat amount and see what the town manager and the police chief would, could do to work within this amount. So I mean, it was a suggestion. So discussion on Kitty, I'm sorry, Jim, it's your meeting. I'm just.
No, Kitty.
So I know a lot of, $67,000 is a lot in overtime. And again, not trying to do shifts or what have you, but if we could maybe redo the proposal, lowering the overtime, because that seems to be part of, that's a lot of, that's a full-time person right there. So if you did 600,000 instead of the 5.
Yep. So if you lower the overtime, you lose the coverage.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily.
Well,
It's just math.
it's 24/7 coverage.
So the, if we looked at staying at a 12-hour schedule, even if I jumped into a 12-hour rotation, you're still looking at a 36-hour work week one week, 48 the next. 36, 48. So you're calculating every month, one patrolman's getting 16 hours of overtime. Right now, this schedule here is set for 11 hours of overtime. One officer may get it twice a month, the other two is only getting it once. So in totality of everything, it is a cost savings. The overtime, I have to have some money in there as overtime to cover vacation time, if someone calls out sick. If I send somebody to training, either if I'm filling their shift to send them, they're getting regular pay, but I gotta have somebody cover the shift. I'm gonna do what I can to help that, but I can't zero base an overtime line with nothing to function on. And, then come back with, asking the public for another $95,000 to spend in overtime. So some of that, if we're not calling out sick or anything like that, it's not going to, it won't be used. See what I'm saying?
Shelley, I think you mentioned.
So with those overtime wages, where does the on-call $36,500 come out of?
That's in the regular wages.
That's in the regular wages?
Mark?
So. Can you ever call the sheriffs to fill in? Increase their activity on days you might be down an officer for sickness, vacation, or call or any of that? Can you ever use?
We can, but I do know that they've been being requested to help cover a lot of municipalities that are understaffed, and they're starting to request a cost to it. So, they may do a little bit here and there to help supplement, but there is a cost that they're asking in some municipalities.
And you were right earlier in the meeting about the contract. We can't intentionally request employees to stay home and then tell the sheriff's office.
Right.
We cannot.
But if they want.
Yes, if there weren't people willing and able, sure, we could put a call out.
Yes.
I'd like to send my motion to make a different one. You want to rescind your second?
I'll rescind my second.
Okay. I make a motion, budget committee propose, police department budget of $600,000.
Mark's motion to propose the $600,000 police department budget.
I'll second that.
And Kitty seconds. Can I just ask a clarifying question, Mr. Chairman? So, Chief Caton, just to follow up on all right, so you touched on the 36-hour schedule, I'm sorry, let me get my thoughts. The bargaining agreement, original one said 36 hours one week, 48 hours the next. So the current sidebar agreement says anything over 43 hours is overtime. So that would be 5 hours of overtime built in as opposed to 11 hours currently. Is that just?
So with that, in that contract there, that was not in. So that is something that that the union has agreed on to help save the overtime money. Okay, and that is a good point because I didn't bring that up. So anytime that an officer is working up to 43 hours, they are getting straight time. They're not getting any overtime after 40. So yes, I see where you're going with that. If now that could, you take that away. I mean, you're taking hours away, you're gonna drive people out. I mean, it's as simple as that. But, that is in the union contract and that can be changed. So.
Cindy, sorry.
Because they were hired under this union contract, and then the sidebar agreement was signed in January, correct? So the officers were hired based on what was in the union contract signed last July.
They were hired under that, yes,
Yeah.
but in that contract, I do have the ability to change the schedule. which I-
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Okay,
That's
thank
what
you.
they will work.
Thank you. Is it okay?
It's all you.
Okay,
Yep,
all
go for
right, well, is there any other question?
So 600,000, year-to-date run rate is 555,000. I think we need something like another 95,000 to finish this fiscal year, but I heard the numbers correctly. So we're underfunding current levels at 600,000.
It's more than 95.
Sorry.
It was more than 95. That was the first discussion when everyone had the
Well,
vote,
since-
and that was an additional 15,000.
It's underfunding.
Yeah.
Significantly, the current operation.
That's what the voters, they voted it down, Jim. You know, I mean, it's,
I'm just asking if that's the clarifying question.
yeah,
I know what the voters did.
yeah, it's, and it, I forgot my point, sorry. Any other
May I
Any
ask
other-
a question?
comments?
Travis has something, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question relating to the overtime. Might be a silly question, but typically when I see that we have a position that is frequently running into overtime, I hire more people for that position so that we can reduce the number of hours for each person and reduce the likelihood that they run into overtime. Is that an option that's been considered?
Rich, do you have the answer up top yet? He was saying. In his experience, when you have overtime, if you hired another person to cut the overtime out, have you looked at numbers like that? If you hired another officer to cut out the
I
overtime?
didn't, but I really, you know, when you add the benefits to it, I don't think this level of overtime is worth hiring another person. I don't.
Got it.
Did you catch
Thank
that,
you.
Travis?
Yeah, that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I understand that if you hire somebody else, that it brings in all the other, you know, added. But don't we also have plans for reserve officers? I mean, everybody keeps saying comp plan. Well, in the comp plan, it says we're gonna have 5 reserve officers.
So we're insured to have 5, okay? So I have one current reserve officer and he won't work patrol shifts. He'll work, the concerts, some fireworks, things like that. And with dropping, I've got $1,500 to work with, that's 50 hours. I can't even field train an officer for 50 hours. So I would say take that 1,500 out of there to, you know, do away with the reserve, officers, to be honest with you. Because by state, you know, by policy and stuff, they should be trained with a minimum 80 hour, actually 8 weeks of field
Joe?
training.
Jim, do you have something you want to share, Colin? We're in a
No, I
public
just-
meeting.
Sorry?
You were in a public meeting, so
Sure,
Sure,
sure. I was just asking a opinion of Rebecca.
no, I mean, it's.
It's nothing.
As I recall, again, my memory, folks know about it. I think during the budget deliberations, as I recall, it was the recommendation by me to reduce reserve officers. I know we reduced them, what I originally, believe we reduced them, what I originally proposed back in January, so.
All right. Jim?
Rather than 600,000, Mark, would you consider pulling your motion and going to 650,000?
I'd like to see other 600 goes first.
Any other?
May I ask another question,
questions or
please?
Comments?
Travis got one more thing, I think. Go ahead, Travis.
So at 600,000, what effect will that have? Does that mean that we are eliminating one officer? We're eliminating certain coverage? How will that affect the coverage that Rangeley has?
Rich or Joe? whoever.
I would surmise that that is so close to the reduction in force proposal that I provided that it constitutes reduction in force.
Catch that, Travis?
Did you say reduction in force?
It would equal a reduction in force.
And so that would amount to how many hours a week that Rangeley would not have coverage?
That's a chief question. It's variable. It's hard to know who could cover what and
It
where they
is,
could
I
cover it.
mean-
It introduces a lot of speculation in the mix. It would be difficult to manage. I know chief could do it, but it would be difficult. And I worry about, as a manager, the impact that would have on the remaining employees. You know, these are folks that respond to very dangerous situations. We all have talked about the number of hours that they work. I do not recommend to anyone in this room that you spread them thin.
Do you
Get
have a
that, Travis?
ballpark idea of how many hours that would leave Rangeley without coverage?
Well, each officer, 1 week they work,
I would say that there probably would be around 6 to 7 hours an evening of on-call that someone would use.
so not overnight, but during the evening.
I would say it'd be overnight.
Okay, gotcha. So it would cut out 6 to 7 hours overnight, that it would just be.
So the overnight period is what would be cut out. So in a business like mine, a hotel business, if we have an issue at night and we need police assistance, we would be waiting for somebody who's on call or for somebody from the county.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I think it would give a opportunity to take a deeper dive into all of the options that could be, come into play. To operate at a budget that size, and certainly at a open town meeting, give quite a few people a chance to ask a lot of similar questions in that and have it thoroughly vetted. And then I think when that was all done, I don't think we'd have to talk about it anymore. I think this would be the consensus that we'll get, that we're looking for. I think it would be helpful.
Foster discussion.
Shelley?
So I just have, a major concern about with coverage and stuff as well. And I'm thinking that when they are working those shifts, you said yourself, Chief, I think at the last meeting, when you are sleeping on those 6 hours that you're at the Aquasic station, you're not really sleeping. It's not the same as if you were at home.
Right.
So with that on call, say you did, the patrol went home and did their shifts and then they did, is there a way to look at the schedule and see like when the calls come in? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so there's a period of time where there's a point where there are less calls.
There's a point overnight that there's less calls,
Right.
absolutely, in
Yeah.
any jurisdiction. But I think that's kind of, you know, where the discussion of having someone here 24 hours a day is for that emergency when it comes in. I can't, we all can't predict when an emergency. I mean, I could send them home at 3 o'clock in the morning and 3:30 in the morning, an emergency comes in, they're spinning around, turning around, coming back. So I think that's where I felt that, and in discussion, that we can provide the best service for Rangeley by having an officer sitting in town that can respond from Aquasic to an emergency anywhere within Rangeley. In a quick manner that isn't going to be 55 minutes. I don't like the thought of sending them home.
Right. Can I just add? But I'm thinking like when someone's out sick, when someone's on vacation and all those coverages, that's where my concern is.
With the current staff.
With the current staff as it is.
And I mean, we've already, people have had vacations, we're already working. And what happens is they're actually splitting the shift. So, Sergeant Adams, he comes in at 8 AM today and he goes home at 8 AM tomorrow. He's on call for the 6 hours. He'll work until usually 6 p.m. 6 p.m. And then the other officer will come in, work the evening, have his 6 hours downtime, then he'd start his normal shift. Or they can, alternate, if they didn't want to do the splitting, they could alternate, with, one officer. And what I've done in the past is I've told them that I'll work until 5, 6 p.m. and cover calls and have somebody coming in. So it'll reduce the overtime, but it also doesn't burden them on working 2 full days. In law enforcement, we're used to long days. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
it's, if they get a call out, it's gonna be a long day. So we're used to that, and knock on wood, it's worked. But we do have plans in place. If something happens, I'll jump in and cover. I'll work the whole overnight shift. I don't care, but, we work well as a team to be able to work that. We're not gonna have, well, I deserve the overtime, I'm taking it whether I'm tired. It's not.
But with your union, are you allowed to do that? Don't you have to give them
We
an
can-
option first for the shift before you would take the shift?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, I just wanna make sure.
Sure.
And how many hours, because law enforcement is different, because where they consider overtime, same way with firefighters. So how many hours can you actually get, work before it's considered overtime? I know
That's what it's
hours is
okay.
43. What is it because there is that magic number and I don't.
And it depends on how, so we're looking at a set, no, we're looking at 7. So if you're looking at a bi-weekly pay, you could expand that to there's certain numbers. If it was a 28-day pay period, you could extend it like 100 hours that they had to work before. So, but here, yes, it's a 43-hour work.
Could it
Where
be
they
more?
can be overtime.
Could it be more?
I don't believe it can.
No, Mr. Chair,
Isn't
we
it 44?
examined
Because I thought it was like 40 hours.
for different categories of employment. For firefighters, it can be more, but for law enforcement, 43 is the maximum. We explored that carefully because we were working on that MOU.
Just one little observation. One of the things about moving here, which is so nice, it is, we're low crime. Having been a minister for 40 years, more than that, New Jersey, in the town, you used to see night wasn't anything happening. I was our chaplain of our police department for all those years, and I know it's a fact, our mayor used to call the chief every once in a while and say, I want revenue. And they'd be out there in the bar close. Daily Mail, last time, you can't leave, and revenue was coming in. It was an unwritten law. That we're not gonna make that known, but that happened with regularity, and it's amazing the money they've generated.
Chief, I want you to go park on his street, just park on his street.
But it is something to behold, because there's one thing of having somebody on a shift that doesn't do anything, you're just waiting for the phone to ring. There's another thing to be very proactive. And to have a proactive police department is very committed to that. They have to be paid well, they have to feel they're respected, and they have to feel that the town is behind them. But if they think, you hire me, and then 6 months later, we're arguing about whether we have the money to keep them, do we want to raise them, or maybe we better cut one of them. That morale just is, I don't care what department you work in or what kind of job you do. If you work under that kind of morale, you don't have good morale. I think.
Thank you.
Harold?
I have a question for the town manager. Based on the number that's been proposed to the budget committee, what's the difference based on our tax rate that would cost us between your number and his number? Are we talking $10 per,
Well, I think the short answer to that is, mill rate has been the same for 2 years. This board has expressed publicly their intent to maintain that for a 3rd year if possible. They've got the resources to do that. So they certainly have the capacity, and it's up to them whether they still have that intent to do it. So if they did maintain a 12.23 mill rate, there would be absolutely no effect unless somebody had built a new garage with that different valuation.
so we should be looking at if there's no impact in the mill rate, we should be looking at funding the department in full.
That's a decision for the voters and for the town.
Leanna?
They already shown. Just because I've already spoken to several of you about that scenario, but I understand completely what you're saying. But the reason it's at zero is because you're taking from the overlay. And if you don't take from the overlay this year, take it from this year, you take it next year, and you take it the following year. When there's no money to take from overlay, we're gonna get hit with 3 years worth of increase. And no one knows what's gonna happen. You know, we understand that that's gonna increase. We're hoping that we're gonna have more taxation coming in. All those pieces can happen, but to be transparent, please make sure people understand that. Because that is an important piece.
Put together an exhibit, Leanna. I looked, I met with the assessor and I asked him for revenue for last year and this year, it's about $160,000 in organic growth. And that was Libby's comment earlier in the week about, we're gonna start to see new revenue come in from the new homes, new construction. And that's just gonna compound over the years.
Leanna?
Absolutely correct. So is expense.
Exactly.
And so my only, and I'm not disagreeing, Jim, about taking it from overlay. All I'm saying is, it's important to be transparent. Because ultimately, if the reverse happens, and 3 years from now, there's no overlay, and all of a sudden our taxes go up, people are gonna look back and say, you deceived me. And that's the word they'll use. All I'm saying is be transparent. That's all I'm saying.
So last year's budget to this year's budget was a delta of $260,000. And then, but if this compounds, let's say it's another 150 or another 160,000 next year, it's the following year. Well, that rising tide lifts all shit.
Oh, nothing else changed.
Correct.
I mean, that's the point. It's not disagreeing. I just.
We've got a motion on the table. Can we go
Yeah,
for it?
well, let's, if there's no further discussion, this is the purpose.
Nick did have his hand up, I think.
Yeah.
Where the two members of the budget committee say they're not in favor of reduction. The motion now on the table, the way I see it, that is exactly what you are doing. I ask you to consider starting the chief's recommendation and working down as opposed to 600,000. Always easier to reduce than it is to ask from.
Nick, Cindy?
So, in response to Nick, there are so many more variables to this than just, it's a springboard for discussion.
I recognize that.
Yeah,
I would
it's-
generalize simply.
Yeah, and it will be the discussion at open town meeting. And that, and it's offering, like I said, just. They don't need to crunch numbers. They'll need to provide, I think the budget committee, like I said, we just got this. And so it's a springboard for discussion for taxpayers to ask questions and for the town manager and chief to offer alternatives. That's all. It may not, I mean.
I agree with you, and again.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How much do we pay for that tax? For the sheriff's department, and you said we're the second highest?
County tax, that number?
Yeah, it's a little over a million. I don't know the exact. It's risen up to.
So we're paying over $1 million?
Not just for the sheriff's office, that's all.
Other things, other things.
Jelly?
Just give me 1 second.
1.22 million in county tax.
This year.
Should have the committed amount for 2026 is $1,352,129.
Is that what you're gonna say, Mark? Yeah. Yeah, he was agreeing with you, yeah.
And then included in those, because everyone always forgets, and they always assume it's only the sheriff's department. That includes in the departments, emergency management, agency, district attorney's office, superior court, commissioner's office, treasurer's office, technical services, facilities, registry of deeds, registry of probate, sheriff's office, communications, which is the dispatch, and a county-wide expense account that they have. The sheriff's department I don't have the committed amount for that, but the one that was at, for them was 3,064,143.
Thank you. That's the department and jail.
Well, the jail is funded,
Separate.
the jail's funded separate because
Thank you.
that's, for the state of Maine.
Thank you. Just want to make sure.
The,
All right, so if there's.
Mark?
You're on
That's
it.
the jail.
All right. I didn't hear what he said.
What Shelley was saying, didn't it?
Yeah.
May I ask another question about the motion, please?
Go right ahead, Travis.
So if the budget committee votes for this motion, votes in favor of this motion, that would be to present it at the town meeting as the proposal from the budget committee.
Correct.
So to me, that is not in the spirit of discussion. That basically looks like this is what the budget committee is suggesting. And I believe that people will read that differently from going in and soliciting feedback and having a discussion similar to this with a larger group of people.
Thank you. Cindy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think people are expecting us to cut it more based on the feedback I'm getting. You know, I know that, you all talk to your people and, I think people are expecting us to cut it more. And to have it under 600,000 has been some of the feedback I've gotten, because of the, big jump and whatnot. So it's it's hard not having the figures to really crunch and mull over, but it's an option from, what got voted down.
We'll say one thing, the next comment, at town meeting, it's obviously easier to have the amount go down than it is to go up. I'll second what you were saying there in the discussion. Mark?
But they'll have the selectmen's recommendation as well.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
With this, so
We'll figure out that.
there'll be a selectman recommendation and a budget committee recommendation.
Right.
So they'll be.
We will get there.
Keith, just in my mind, I'm just thinking like, obviously we need two numbers to move forward because it's becoming monotonous. But so like obviously, you'd like to have more time as a committee, and I respect that wholly, and I understand. But if you come up with a number of whatever that number was, $600,000, how do you communicate that to the public thing, saying what that represents? Like, here's my number based on the squeeze for time.
That's what we would put back to the town manager and the chief.
So, okay, so with that, we don't know what the public wants reduction in number, like, obviously, we'll say, like you said, you talk to people and maybe they want less, under 600,000, but do they want 24-hour coverage? Do they, what do they want within that 600, well, whatever that number is? We can throw a number all day long, but until we know what the 177 people that voted it down, until we know what they want for coverage, our number is kind of just a best guess scenario, right? As a group, I mean, either way.
I was just gonna say, so having a number, that gives you a chance to say, what can I play with? How can I make this work? And if you end up coming up with 650 is the lowest I can get and still have 24-hour coverage or whatever, I mean, it's gonna be up in your hands to say, can I do this or not?
Joe?
That number is 691. We've
691.
already presented that to you.
Right.
Mark?
To keep, we just got this stuff tonight. There's not a time for the budget committee to meet before. So, there's a limit to how comprehensive we can be with what's in these numbers here, but it's above the lowest proposal there, so it's a number that can be discussed at the open town meeting, and, I think it's a good thing to have out there, because it fosters discussion, and I think it'll, where it ends up, it ends up, people are gonna have a different number as well. But it hasn't even been approved yet by the budget committee. We need to take a vote.
No. I was called on.
down to is just what Joe said. 600,000, if that's the number you put forth, that means almost certainly one less officer. So make sure the public knows that the budget committee's recommendation, if it's $600, means a reduction in force. The 691 or the 688, 383 does not mean a reduction in force. So that's the plain and simple, and that's what you were talking about. That's what the public needs to understand. And they may not like the number at 691 for full force, but that's how you get it. So they need to know the difference. And it's a pretty simple difference. I don't really see how it needs to be discussed any farther. That's what your number means. And one of these other numbers means something different. That's right.
Does it really mean a reduction in force though? And just hear me
I
out.
said almost certainly.
And right, I heard you, I'm now asking you to hear me, so bear with me just 1 second. Does it necessarily mean a reduction in force? And the reason I'm asking that specific question, Ethan, is because of the cost saving alternatives that we hadn't considered. Like using part-time and reserve officers, scaling back maybe some of the overnight coverages, the chief taking a more active role in the patrol schedule. I mean, those things are things that, while the numbers were thrown at us, we're not having those conversations. We're not giving viable thought process to how else we could have 24/7 coverage, what else that might look like. So I would hate to hear somebody say that because we're voting for this number, it's most certainly going to be a reduction in the force. My intent is, the people said no to that number, and the feedback I've received, they're going to want at least $100,000 reduction off it right out of the gate, from the feedback I've heard. So that's the position I'm coming from. I don't see that means a reduction in force. I see that means we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to take some fine lines and we're going to figure this out. Because there is a potential to do that depending on how you work the force.
Chief, do you see a reduction in force at 600 or a reduction at 24/7?
I do.
Keith?
At the point, how is Rangeley suited, but in general, I guess, how is recruitment for part-time officers? Is that the right way to say that? Reserve officers? I mean, how does that look? How does Rangeley look as a place for those officers to?
I can tell you the downfall with Rangeley is the travel. I mean, we pay $30 an hour for a reserve officer. They're paying $30 in gas just to that. We've been looking, we've asked a bunch of good officers that we'd like to have up here as reserves, but nobody's bitten on it.
This is just curiosity for me. I don't know.
Yep. Shelley?
So I just want to clarify, when you say overtime meeting, that means everyone's gonna be face to face, correct? It's not where everyone's going to the polls.
That's what it is.
Thank you.
All right, anything else before we call vote? Jim, you had your hand up?
I just don't want
Thank you.
All right, all those so it's Mark's motion, Kitty's second for $600,000 proposed, what? Oh,
You rescinded.
and Kitty seconded, yeah, she seconded the revised $600,000. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? That motion fails. Where's the popcorn? Popcorn. All right, where do we go from here?
I make a motion to recommend 602,218. Sorry, I know that doesn't sound like much of a difference, but I want to respect the voters and give them the $100,000 cut that I've heard.
All right, all right, so,
602,218.
all right, after this motion, Mark seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's 4 in favor. All those opposed? That's 3 opposed. Motion carries.
Now you're gonna tell us what you voted?
What is it right now?
Oh.
We take your recommendation. We have a recommendation from the budget committee of 602 218. Donnie, what's your flavor?
One moment.
Motion for the town manager's recommendation, the amount of 691,877.
Second.
Motion from Ethan, second from Jake. Any discussion? Ready yet?
So, Richard, I just think it was, you know, you had your motion and you took your cost of living out. Yeah, commend you for that. Say from the experience that I've had with people who've done that. One really works out. Everybody should be fairly just to say, giving a shot and it's good for your. So thank you for trying to offer that up. You know, it's not in Joe's motion, but I'm glad you're going with it. Town managers.
I'll second that. Rich, I appreciate your effort in order to make a difference, and it shows that you're dedicated to working for something anyway. So thank you very much.
You know.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Don't move. All right, down to number 7, other business. Need to call for an open town meeting. What's the time frame? 7 days on that?
It's about 7 days. I would recommend at least 7 days from tomorrow.
What's Monday the 7th look like?
You have a board meeting that night. If it's your pleasure, you could move that with notice. You could move that meeting to a different night and replace it with this if the 7th was your choice.
I'd like to do that. You guys have any input?
I'm good with that.
Yep. Is that a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion from Keith, second from Jake. Move our board meeting to the 9th of July. Oops, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Time and location, the school, I think they can move some things around that week. So that will be your location. You just need to let us know the time.
We're not voting on that yet, though.
Yeah, we'd be calling for the town meeting with the time.
No, I was, you guys were voting on your next meeting.
That's
right?
what I thought.
Well, we had it was 2 things there, but yeah, I was wrapping them both into one.
Okay.
We can tackle the first one. So you made a motion Keith made a motion to move our regular meeting to the 9th of July.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Jake seconded, all right.
So now we need to
start with that one.
My apologies.
And do we have any public hearings or anything on the 9th?
Is a planning board meeting at 6.
Okay,
And they have a site visit at 5:30. It'll be a short meeting, but it's still the meeting.
Thursday the 10th, is there anything? I don't have the calendar in front of me.
I don't
I
believe
don't
so.
think there's anything.
I don't think so.
So we'll go 10, and we don't have any public hearings or anything scheduled for that meeting. Actually, that's our first meeting of the new year, so should be a 5 o'clock start on that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor? All right, so moved. And for a town meeting, we're talking about the 7th. You said the school, I was just assuming, I would say 6 PM, I think traditionally when those started.
Yep.
I guess that's.
Give everybody a chance to get out of work.
Motion, 1 second.
Second. You never make a move.
I know, second by Ethan. Any other discussion? All in favor? All right, so moved on that. And then Joe, did you want to go over the warrant?
Yes, in your materials, 2 documents, very similar. It was like this.
Mhm.
There are 2 options here. Marty's gonna refresh which one to choose. One is a app style option. Means that you would have a question on EX1. Actually, the more I think about this, you actually have 2 different recommendations. So you can go with a capped, which has the EX1 with the amount spelled out, with your amount spelled in there, or you could do with to see what's on the town and raise and appropriate. It's the second option. This one, to Larry's point, I don't think he's here anymore. This one gives town meeting authority to go over the higher amount.
Up or down,
They go up
versus
or
the
down.
other one, you could go to that level
And that's it.
and then go down.
Or go up.
Get a motion?
Motion
So
for,
To see what
see what, sorry, I didn't,
And then what Marty's working on now, she's supposed to insert the actual recommendations that folks voted on here tonight and insert the correct dates.
Second.
We have a motion from Keith and a second by Ethan. All in favor? All right, so moved. We'll wait to get that back from her. And we'll move to our regular session. We're going down to the schedule. All right. Yes. We have to wait for that actual, I mean, we.
You know, you can, did your motion include, approving and signing the warrant?
Did you say that, Keith? You said don't move it, so if you said it, Keith said it.
Pop during it, definitely.
So there's no need to wait. If you've moved to do that, you don't need to do that in session, you can do that.
Okay. Which means we're at number 9. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Favor. Thank everybody for coming tonight and ones that were here last time. Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry, what day did you guys move to regular?